It's almost a month since Hamas launched a massive terrorist strike on the nation of Israel and Israeli civilians, and the situation remains as tense as ever, if not more tense. The latest development is that the US is deploying a very large naval force in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. They clearly anticipate a lot of trouble in this region. Yemen has gotten involved with missile strikes on Israel. Hezbollah, which is based out of southern Lebanon, has been involved for quite some time. And the Islamic world seems to be coming together in opposition against Israel and in support of the Palestinian cause. So it looks like at the slightest misstep, slightest miscalculation, you could have a larger conflict that could erupt in this region. So please subscribe and let's find out what is happening and what could happen in the coming days. What are the possible scenarios? So first of all, let's take a look at the map of this region, because that's how we orient ourselves. Here's the map on your screen right now. You can see where Israel is. It's on the western part of the map that you're seeing. South of Israel, you have the Sinai Peninsula, which belongs to Egypt. West of Israel, you have the Mediterranean Sea. North of Israel, you have Lebanon. Further north, you have Syria and Turkey. East of Israel, you have Jordan, you have the Golan Heights, you have the West Bank. Further east, you have Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Further east, you have Iran, and on the eastern edge of the map, you can see a glimpse of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So this is the Middle East region, which is currently under crisis. And like I said, the big development is that the US is in the process of deploying a very large naval force in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. This is possibly the largest naval deployment the US has ever done in the past several decades. It's deploying 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. Thus far, you have 11 Burke-class destroyers that are in the region. There's a large number of cruisers. There are amphibious assault ships. There are THAAD missile defense systems that have been deployed in the region. Patriot missile defense systems. There are multiple squadrons of fighter jets. There are strategic bombers. There's an unknown number of submarines, which will obviously accompanying the surface assets of the US Navy. And there are other undisclosed assets as well. And you have naval assets that belong not just to the US, but to a large number of nations, which also includes assets from nations like Indonesia and Bangladesh. So you have a multinational naval force that is led by the US that is being assembled in the eastern Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Israel. So this is clearly not something that is there to simply safeguard the security of Israel. This is a much larger naval force that is being deployed. It's almost like an invasion force. It kind of reminds me, at least, of the kind of force the US had assembled in the Persian Gulf region before the 1991 invasion of Iraq. So this is a very large force they're deploying, a very powerful force, and one wonders what the purpose of this deployment is. So so that's one thing we can try and understand in this video. So now let's kind of rewind and see what happened. We know that on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, Hamas launched this massive terrorist strike on Israel, on Israeli civilians, and way more than 1,500 Israeli civilians have died thus far. The death toll is very large, and it's emerged that Hamas has been stockpiling thousands of cheap homemade missiles, rockets, not really missiles, but rockets. They have created a very large network of tunnels that possibly can ferry materials and stuff and people and fighters, etc., into Israel. And these tunnels also help them safeguard their assets, whatever they've built up over the years, missiles and stockpiles of arms, ammunition, whatnot. So that is the challenge that Israel faces. All of this is something that is in the West. It is in the Gaza Strip region. So that's a huge challenge for Israel. Now, Israel has been bombarding the Gaza Strip, and they seem to be preparing for an invasion of Gaza and a renewed occupation of Gaza, which means Israeli boots on the ground in Gaza, and they essentially want to end Hamas once and for all. But that is something that is easier said than done, because the entire Islamic world supports the Palestinian cause. Hezbollah, which is based out of southern Lebanon, is now involved in the conflict. There have been there's been fighting going on between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel has also sent its fighter planes into Jordan, into Syria. They've been bombarding certain locations over there. And now, just a couple of days ago, maybe in the past 24 to 48 hours, it has emerged that Yemen has gotten involved. They have launched a large number of missiles at Israeli positions. As you can see on the map, once again, Yemen is over 1,500 kilometers from Israel. So they clearly have the capability to launch ballistic missiles and cruise missiles at that distance. Uh, so that's a new development. So that is the situation we find ourselves in. Now let's look at the map once again and see which are the major actors, the major players in this region. So we have Israel, obviously, which is the center of the entire conflict, which is the focus of the conflict, and you have the smaller players, the immediate neighbors of Israel, like Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, and then you have the big guns in the region, which is Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. You can even see Russia on the map. And so that's the situation. So the four major players apart from Israel are Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. And that's the situation. And there is a conflict in the Islamic world itself. There is not a conflict as such, but it's a battle for supremacy. It's every all of these nations, they vie for the position of the leader of the Islamic world, and all of these nations, they have their own specific national interests, and they all have their own ambitions, long term, short term ambitions. For example, Turkey. If you look at Turkey, which is in the region, the president of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, has recently made a statement in which supports Palestine. He said this in front of a huge crowd. He said, I mean, he kind of spoke about a revival of the Ottoman Empire. He spoke about the fact that Gaza was once part of the Ottoman Empire, how Thessaloniki, which is now in Greece, was once part of the Ottoman Empire. So he has these Ottoman revivalist ambitions. He wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire. We know the situation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. That's a whole different story, but that's also part of it. So he wants to create a great grand coalition of Turkic nations, and he wants to kind of revive the Ottoman Empire. So clearly, Mr. Erdogan, if he gets what he wants, if he can, get the outcome of his dreams, he would like to conquer Israel and take over the entire region, and maybe go much further than that. So that is one aspect of the entire geopolitical situation. Then you have Egypt, which kind of has good relations with Israel for a very long time, especially after Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. But there's the question of the Palestinian people of Gaza, and Egypt has refused to take a single refugee into its territory from Gaza. And if Israel launches a ground operation in Gaza, an invasion of Gaza, then you could see a situation where civilians spill over into the Sinai region, which is something Egypt doesn't want. So then you could have a conflict between Egypt and Israel. And the situation is that if one of these Islamic nations gets involved in the conflict with Israel, the others would be sorely tempted to also pile in. And this is something that could lead to a larger conflict, like something like we have seen in the past when all the neighbors of Israel have attacked Israel at various points in time, in history. So there is that. Then you have Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is a nation that does not want to get embroiled in any big war. They want peace. They want to rebuild the nation. They want to take the nation in a new direction. That's what the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants. He wants to develop the nation and kind of pivot it away from oil and gas export, which still remains one of the major things. But he also wants the nation to become a tourism hub and whatnot. So a war could derail all those plans. So Saudi Arabia most likely doesn't want to get involved in a big war, but if things go in a certain way, they may have no option but to also get involved or be left out of the leadership race of the Islamic world. So there is that. Then you have Iran. Iran has long-standing ties with Hezbollah, with Hamas, and there's Qatar as well, which is one of the kind of big players in the background. They have been supporting and funding Hamas and Hezbollah. They have also been involved in the negotiations between the US and the Taliban. They are a US proxy. That's what Qatar is. So Qatar is also there. The Hamas leadership resides in Qatar. So there's all of this going on. So as the situation progresses, as the situation in Gaza gets worse, from the perspective of civilians, you could see a coming together of the Islamic world, and they may start speaking in one voice against Israel. So you could see a larger global expansion of anti Israel sentiment that could happen. You're also seeing a lot of such sentiment in Europe, where you are beginning to see a sizable Islamic population. So there's all of this happening. Now, Yemen, like I said, has gotten involved in the last 24 to 48 hours. They've launched missile strikes on Israel. And then you have Yemen also is a nation that has very close ties with Iran. So Iran is one of the major nations in the that's kind of in the background of the conflict, and Iran considers Israel a nation that doesn't have the right to exist, and it also considers the U.S. to be the great Satan, Shaitan-e-Bozorg. And the US has, for a very long time, for decades since 1979, wanted to teach Iran a lesson. Now, it's not that easy to teach Iran a lesson. Iran is a large nation. It has a significant stockpile of arms and ammunition. It has very good missile capabilities. So here is a map of the US military assets and deployments in the Persian Gulf region and the Middle East region. As you can see, Iran is kind of encircled by US bases. But if the US, let's say, attacks Iran, it's not going to be that easy to destroy Iran. I mean, they can certainly launch missile strikes, cruise missile strikes at Tehran and various other cities. But the Iranians could also target the various US assets, military assets, bases, etc. in the location. The Iranians have a good stockpile, a very significant stockpile of arms, ammunition, and missiles as well. They have not been part of any war, so all of their stock is still there. They've been supplying drones to Russia. Russia needs arms and ammunition and drones for the ongoing Ukraine conflict. So the Iranians have been supplying Russia with loitering munitions and drones, the Shahed 2 drones, which are very good, which performed very well. So Iran is a significant military power. They also have the ability, the capability to tail US naval assets, including aircraft carrier strike groups from the air, without the Americans knowing about it. So that is a very dangerous and very potent capability. It may mean that they may be able to actually take out US aircraft carriers, which would be a disaster for the US. I have said this many times that aircraft carriers are kind of obsolete. It's very hard for an aircraft carrier to operate in a contested environment. It's just a mathematical certainty that if the opposite side has sufficient missiles, they're going to take out an aircraft carrier or damage it very badly. So the US may not want to deploy its aircraft carriers very close to Iran right now. So this is the complicated scenario that we are witnessing in the Middle East. Israel has been supplying arms and ammunition to Ukraine to support Ukraine in the conflict against Russia, which means that Israel's arms and ammunition stockpiles could be low. And if it is attacked, let's say it is Hezbollah also may have thousands of rockets. Hamas has thousands of rockets. Israel has this Iron Dome system, which has very expensive rockets, missiles that take out rockets. If it starts running out of these anti-rocket missiles, then what does it do? That's the question. If it starts getting hit and it has no means of stopping those hits from coming in, what does Israel do? What if a nation like Egypt or maybe Turkey or maybe some other nation gets involved and everybody else piles in? Then what does Israel do? Israel obviously has the last option, the Samson option, which is the nuclear retaliation if it is on the verge of being annihilated. And we also have the very large US naval presence in the region, which would kind of prevent this from happening. But as you can see, this is a very delicate and dangerous situation. Lots and lots of things could go wrong. And if there is an attack on Iran once again, then Russia and China are also not far away from being involved, because Russia, as I said, has a significant positive relationship with Iran. China has a 25-year strategic agreement with Iran. So China also would like Iran to not get destroyed, right? And then you have the China factor. So while the Ukraine conflict is raging and now we have a new conflict in the Middle East, China could seize the opportunity to make its move in the South China Sea, maybe take Taiwan. That's a factor that we cannot forget. And there's also the North Korea factor, right? North Korea is a Chinese client state or a Chinese vassal state. So you know, all of this raging over here, the North Koreans make some moves and then the Chinese make a move on Taiwan. That could happen. And you also have significant Chinese deployments that we are hearing about in the Himalayan region vis-a-vis India. So right now what we are seeing is that we have this expansion of these tensions and the proliferation of these tensions, not just in the Middle East, not just in Israel, but also in Asia, right? So that is the difficult phase the world is going through. And the US seems to be anticipating something big, and that's why they have deployed this enormous number of naval assets, very potent, very powerful, very capable naval assets in the Eastern Mediterranean region. So, what could happen? One hopes that the situation calms down, one hopes that everybody sees sense, but you could see uh, a larger expansion, a larger, conflagration of this conflict, and other nations could get involved. If that happens, especially if Iran gets involved, you could see the blockading of the Strait of Hormuz that connects the Persian Gulf with the Indian Ocean. If that happens, you're going to have a choking off of all the oil exports out of this region, which could mean that you could see a disaster in the global economy. The Western economies could collapse, especially Europe, etc. The US will be fine, but Europe could collapse. European economies could be hit very badly. India also will have to find a way to work around this thing. So yeah, a very difficult situation right now, and the slightest miscalculation, the slightest misstep from one of the major actors could cause a much larger conflict. You could see, if a conflict erupts, you could see Lebanon being hit by U.S. assets, naval assets, and maybe the end of Hezbollah as well. You could see the end of Hamas if Israel goes ahead and invades the Gaza Strip, but that could invite retaliation from a large number of actors. And you could see consolidation of the Islamic world, like I said. So lots of different scenarios exist right now. There is no way of predicting. I don't predict what happens. These are the possible scenarios. There's no real way of predicting what is going to happen next. But you are seeing that the US is anticipating trouble, or maybe they want to take some action. Maybe the US wants to take military action. You don't assemble such a large naval force, such a powerful naval force, and just sit there. You do it only if you either anticipate some action, you want to respond to that, or you want to take the first step yourself and reconfigure the map of the Middle East. So that's where we are, and I'm going to keep watching the situation. I'm going to keep analyzing what happens, but that's where we are right now. Difficult times for the world, and one hopes that this does not escalate and get worse, but this is where we are. So I'm going to keep an eye on the situation, and I'm going to keep on analyzing things as they happen. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.